Welcome back to another episode of Trading Card History, where we dive deep into picture collectibles' rich journey from the 1800s to today. From baseball to Beatles, from football to fashion, and from pre-war to Pokemon, we will be covering every flavor of cards, the stories around them, and the people that made them happen. Let's resume.
Part 3. The Awkward Teenage Years, 1914 to 1927. As of now, tobacco has been the baseball card king. Other industries watched the frenzy around cigarette cards unfold and wanted a share of the profit. The biggest drawback to tobacco cards was the tobacco itself. There's a lot of negative press around having an item marketed for kids packaged with harmful products, so a newcomer to the stage would capitalize on this. Welcome Cracker Jacks. Take me out to the ballgame. Cracker Jacks has long been the classic ballpark snack since the 1890s. But in 1914, they started inserting baseball cards in their products. This is the most obvious marriage between card and product, yet it oddly took decades after tobacco cards became a hit for them to be implemented. No longer did kids need to ask their parents for their card from their dad's cigarette pack. When they were watching a game at the ballpark, kids were already getting Cracker Jacks, so this cut out the middleman and satisfied many parents who were against the tobacco industry taking advantage of children. These cards are strikingly unique with a vibrant red background and a classic Cracker Jack lettering. These cards are much larger than T206, allowing a much larger canvas for action poses and detail in the illustrations. The backs of these cards contain short biographies of the players, which allowed kids to connect with the athletes and increased their collectability. Unfortunately, the combination of these cards being made out of very thin paper, much thinner than T206, and being included in boxes of molasses-covered popcorn caused very few to survive to today, especially in high grade. Most surviving copies have large stains and darkening from the candy, with dents and creases from them bouncing around loose in the box. The 1915 edition of this set is much more available because in addition to being in Cracker Jack boxes, a full set could be purchased separately. At the same time as Cracker Jack's debut into collectible cards, other producers, such as newspapers, began producing their own. Newspaper manufacturers already had all the tools necessary to produce and distribute cards, so it was another perfect match along with Cracker Jack. Newspaper manufacturers already had the means to produce cardstock and print the baseball illustrations, and were already distributing their product to people's doorsteps, so it took very little extra effort to implement the cards. Baltimore News is one of the first companies to do this, and they are worth noting because they produced the first Babe Ruth baseball card. These cards were much larger than existing baseball cards and were monocolor in either red or blue. The 1914 Baltimore News set only featured in Baltimore Orioles, but included Ruth because he signed with the then minor league Orioles as his baseball debut before quickly being sold to the Red Sox a few months later. He managed to squeak on the roster just in time for this card release, but these cards are extremely scarce, so the hobby accepted Babe Ruth card is the 1915 Sporting News Babe Ruth, where he is on the Boston Red Sox. The combination of the 1915 Sporting News card being a standard card size, as opposed to the jumbo Baltimore News version, and Babe being on a major league team instead of a minor league team, resulted in most preferring the Babe in the Red Sox uniform. While baseball players were still the dominant focal point of card imagery, other entities, such as movie stars in the Chromo Gravure set, and fashion from around the world from the Edwardian set sprung up. These came to be rather randomly and did not have congruent releases like baseball cards did. Manufacturers, such as tobacco cards with ATC, occasionally still released non-sport sets, such as flags from around the world, but these had noticeable sales drops compared to baseball, so they would keep going back to what worked. In the early 1920s, As more and more entities dogpiled into collectible cards following Crackerjack and newspaper companies, many low-quality sets of cards with poor advertising and unknown origins emerged. A common form of these cards were called strip cards. Strip cards were made in long strips and often sold in retail stores where they were separated at the counter and handed to the customer upon purchase. Due to random retailers everywhere essentially making their own or buying from small flash-in-the-pan producers, there was lots of ambiguity with the origins of many of these cards, along with endless amounts of variations. Since these cards were generally poor in quality and needing to be hand-cut, they are rather uncommon but also less desirable than the traditional releases that have been previously mentioned. This post-T206 era was an awkward phase of collectible card history that lacked true identity. Some collectible historians refer to this period as the stepchild era, often forgotten alongside the more notable cards before it and after it. Sets came and went, themes came and went, and it seemed that every mom-and-pop shop had their own small line of cards. The stepchild era, however, came to an end in 1928 due to a rivalry in the bubblegum market with two very little companies called Fleer and Gowdy. You might have heard of them.